New Thought Media Network is pleased to present The Inclusive Church, Ideas and Resources for Leaders of Multicultural Ministries. The Inclusive Church with Tracy Brown. Tuesdays at 12 noon Mountain Time. Join Tracy and her guests as they go deep and share practical tips and resources you can use in your ministry. And now let's explore the Inclusive Church with Tracy Brown.
Hello, everybody. It's Tuesday. It's 12 noon Mountain Time, or a few minutes after, and my name is Tracy Brown. I love taking a little time out of the week to focus on what are some real and practical things that we can do to create inclusive churches. And when I say churches, I am talking about the people, the gathering of people, sharing spiritual practices, learning and committing to spiritual principle together. That's really what a church is. It is not a building, or not just a building. So when you hear me refer to church, I'm talking about the people who come together in community, in a belief system, spiritual belief system. And this show is really designed to focus on multicultural ministries and what are ideas and resources that the leaders in multicultural ministries can find helpful, useful, inspiring even, maybe. And to that end, about, 2/3 of the time, I have a conversation with a featured guest or two. And about a third of the time, we do what I refer to as toolkit topics, where I just take 30 minutes-ish and share information and ideas and resources with you. Today, I have a featured guest, so buckle in, and we will, over the next 50 minutes or so, dive into both of our experiences, what we've learned, what we hope for and wish for in multicultural spiritual communities, and more. My guest today is Crystal Fry, and I am excited to have this conversation because over the last year, Crystal Fry and I have had a series of conversations about really how do we make this work? How do we set ourselves up and our spiritual communities up for success? And we've even had a couple of conversations about, well, tried that, it didn't work so well, or, I feel like I just ran into a brick wall. And so in this conversation today, you're going to get a little bit of both the things that have worked and the things that we've learned from because they didn't work so well, or they presented unexpected challenges. If you've been watching the show for a while, then you know that my tendency is to share 3 random facts about my featured guests. Because if I give you their full bio, or if I go through all the things I know about them, that would be, 20 or 30 minutes, and it would cut into giving you more value. You can always look up the guests online, and I will give you that information about Crystal as well. So 3 randomly chosen facts about Crystal Fry. Number 1. Crystal grew up in the Midwest, but currently lives in Northern California in the Oakland kind of Bay Area. And it's funny, I laugh at myself when I say that because my brain wants to just say Oakland or San Francisco or Albany or Berkeley. But, when you're in that area, There are lots of places you could be and that you're affected by. So that's fact number one. Fact number two, Crystal Fry is a very skilled, very skilled coach and change agent. And I think you'll hear that in some of our conversation. And then fact number three, it's an opinion. It's an opinion. My opinion is, though, reason that I think she is so good at helping people change their lives and their organizations is because she has had to she has chosen to make huge changes in her personal life and to choose the kind of life she loves and do the work to actually move in that direction. And to do that, whether there's fear or not, which is a subtle or not so subtle connection to that. She's part of a group that refers to itself as Fear Slayers. So with those three pieces of information, let me bring Crystal on. Hello.
Hello, Tracy. Thank you so much. I am humbled by your words and introductions. Those random facts landed right in my heart.
So what else, is there anything else that you want people to know about you that sets a context for our conversation today? I picked three things, but then you're obviously welcome to add anything else about your background or who you are.
Well, I think by trade, it's important to know that I've been working on making change with leaders for over 20 years. And the way that I do that, I work with leaders, entrepreneurs, and all sorts of change makers to achieve development goals that are aligned with their values and to build psychologically safe and inclusive spaces. So this is what I do in my work. And I've also been a part of the New Thought community for 7 years. And my spiritual life is primary to my existence. And so my community is dear to my heart. And I feel very passionate about bringing the skills and learnings that I've had in my professional experience to our community, where I think there's infinite potential to be the model of change and a world that works for everyone.
You know, I hadn't thought about it until just listening to you just now, that one of the similarities we have is that we were doing leadership development and change management work, and that team building and all of that really is diversity and inclusion work, getting people to lead folks who are different from themselves, getting people to work as a team with people who are different from themselves, all the communication challenges, and that both of us had been doing that in our career long before we started applying that into the spiritual community or communities where we were going for spiritual nourishment, but also contributing nourishment in this way.
Absolutely. And it's always felt to me, of all the volunteer work that I've done within my spiritual community, this is what I feel most passionate and driven to do. And so I think that that's important, that we all tune in to where we're really driven, to find how we can best contribute to our communities.
I know
that everyone has something to give.
Yeah, and that truly is what can make our spiritual communities inclusive. If you can get people to tap in where they have passion, right? So it's not just about, are you involved in some political activity? It's, no, your spiritual community is and or will be a model of inclusion if people have opportunities to show up and share what they care about. And I it strikes me that it's maybe a little sad that we need to even say that, because it almost seems like a no-brainer. But I'm reminded how many conversations I've been in where people think as soon as you say you want to talk about inclusion in our spiritual community, they make the assumption that you're telling them that they're doing something wrong related to racism, sexism, homophobia, etc., and that they have to fix that. But in reality, in the big picture, the churches that are most inclusive, you see all kinds of people bringing forth what they're good at and what they know about and what they can do to expand the community.
This is absolutely the kind of inclusion that I envision and imagine, right? Not only in our spiritual communities, but at large, a world where we can all bring forth the special creative talents that we've been imbued with.
Yeah. So let's do I want to start with, let's share a crazy or disappointing story first, or let's share a great success or fun story first? I don't care. Which one do you want to start with?
I think I'll go with crazy, successful, fun. And this was an outing that we arranged as a group, and there was huge amounts of tension in the group. In fact, we were amidst a splintering of our social justice and inclusion committee. And so we scheduled an event to go and see oh my gosh, I am forgetting her name right now, and this feels terrible in the moment, but the woman who wrote Cast, I'm thinking Isabel Allende, and that's the only thing I can get out.
I know Isabel is correct, right?
Wilkinson, thank you.
Isabel
Allende right there.
Isabel Allende is great too.
Yeah,
Cast.
Absolutely. So we organized a dinner, and we all got together, and everything can be very complicated to go to San Francisco. So it required an incredible amount of communication and ride shares and parking and picture taking and just everything. It was such a healing experience. Not only were we all so touched and blown away by what Isabel Wilkinson spoke about, by the people who were there, but there was this healing, this amazing healing that happened through the experience of just being together and doing a thing together. And so I don't know if that story is crazy, but it sort of felt that way trying to get all 14 of us at this event. But in the end, it turned out to be so worth it. And I know that this still lives on in the memory of our church as an inclusive experience of a coming together where there were really difficult frictions. And I just think it's a great representation of what we need to do, right? When the conversations aren't moving us forward, what else can we do? How can we redirect and get back to a loving perspective, a community effort? It was so uplifting.
I love that. And something you just said triggered a thought for me. And that is, you were saying, paraphrase, like, when, things aren't working, or when things are getting tough, just in general, my interpretation in my head was try a different approach. So go do something together, right? Where you are engaged with each other. You're not directly focused on the topic, but you're doing something related to the topic, and then you have to come together and work as a team and support each other to do. So it's like that transition from head to heart, or to hands, from thinking to doing. If we've What I'm putting in my head, and I'm hoping that somebody else hears this as a good tip, when you've been offering classes or hosting dialogues about any area within the topic of diversity and inclusion, and people are approaching burnout, or attendance is starting to wane, or there's frustration, look for, what can we go do together? Like, can we go hear someone speak and have a shared experience of it? Can we go in Dallas? Our Dallas Symphony Orchestra throughout the year does so many different programs featuring different cultures. And so it's like, oh, I've never thought about saying, hey, let's get a group together and go to the Dallas Symphony free concert in West Dallas in the Latino community. Because if we have this shared experience, it gives us something to talk about. And in the process of planning it and making it happen, we actually showed that we have something in common. So yeah, now you've got my brain going.
Well, I think you're picking up on something really important, right? Because it's like and we went from the head to the hands. We're doing something together, but it brought us back to the heart. We had begun all of our work together in reading the Cass book. That our social justice group grew out of that experience and hearing each other in those rooms and learning about not only the racism that exists out there, but right here in our community. And so it brought us back to the heart of what we were doing.
I love that. So you used a word, and you and I actually didn't plan to talk about this, but we have talked about it before. So language matters. Language matters, right? And I was recently, like a week or so ago, I was recently in a conversation with a group of people. And for 45 minutes, the conversation was about what's the difference or distinction between social justice and sacred activism, and what do both of those things have to do with being inclusive?
Woo, okay.
And so, yeah, so I'm just like passing you the ball. Like, if you had been in that conversation, right? It's like we didn't plan to talk about that, but that's what we ended up talking about for 45 minutes. Social justice, is it the same as sacred activism? And what do either or both of them have to do with inclusion?
Okay, and let me ask you also, am I allowed to bring up our conversation?
A past conversation?
Yes.
Sure.
Okay. Okay, great.
I don't remember, but sure.
All right, awesome. So social justice, right? I think of social justice, and this, I'm just going to use Crystal words. I'm not going to try to sound smart here. I just want to tell you what I really think it is, because I could do the other one too. But I want to speak from the heart here. Social justice for me is what we talk about when we say a world that works for everyone. That means to me that everyone has access to the resources that they need, and that everyone is included valued, honored, respected in society, right? So for me, it's really about us all being taken care of and having a place in society. So that's social justice to me. Social activism is what us people who are spiritually activated do to obtain it, in my opinion, right? How can we work towards actively creating, building a world that works for everyone? So definitely related. And then inclusion to me is wrapped up in both of those, because for me, the diversity that we see in the world, plants, animals, everything's, all of the beauty and diversity of nature is what I see in humanity. And I think it's what you referred to as that stained glass window, right? Where we are each unique expressions. And for me, inclusion is allowing, embracing, and uplifting that diversity. So when I talk about inclusion, that's what I want to see. I want a place for all of us to be and to be well in community with each other. Mm-hmm. What do you think? How did I do?
Well, and you know me well enough to know that. Well, you know me well enough to know that I don't think there is one single right answer. I think what's important is that we talk about what the meanings are, so that when we're in conversations in our spiritual communities, that we're on the same page in general. Or even if I disagree with you, at least I'm understanding how you're using the term.
Yes.
And if it's different from the way I use the term, that's okay, as long as I understand that. Otherwise, we think we're talking about the same thing, and we're not. One of the things I do love about how you differentiate between these things, these terms, is that you really talk about social justice as kind of like it is a thing in itself, but sacred activism, which makes sense because it's got the word active and activism in it, is about the action we take. And so I think a lot of times people use the words as synonyms, but just in looking at them, they really do call you to a different place. Like social justice is a thing, a noun, and sacred activism is an action or a verb. And then you linked it together with, and the action being taken is designed to lead toward the goal or the thing. So they're connected in that way. And the conversation I was in with several people, we spent 45 minutes and we didn't, come out with it is this one thing, but it was such a rich conversation, because in our spiritual communities, if we don't have that conversation, we are leaving it to people to make up their own meaning. And, I've been blessed to engage with several different churches and spiritual communities where, because the dialogue never happened, when people hear the term sacred activism, they still just hear politics. And so, if you're a leader in a spiritual community and you assume that because you're saying, let's apply our spiritual principle to the social issues of today and find places to contribute to building a world that works for everyone, or a world where people have access to what they require. If you don't have those conversations, people assume you're saying, oh, we're going to go out and we're going to vote for this particular candidate. And because they're the ones who, there's activism related to. So I love that.
I think this is really related to what you said earlier too. Like, as soon as you start talking about inclusion and diversity, equity, and inclusion, people think you're saying that they personally are racist, or that the community itself is racist, and that there's, and pointing to a problem that most people feel very uncomfortable discussing. And so just talking about speaking to what we want more and more, I feel, is really important to getting people on board. The more we can talk about what we want and what we're trying to get to, I think the more we can get people on board.
Right. And that's what we do in other ways with our spiritual teaching and how to apply it in our lives. We are always saying, clearly define what it is you want. Clearly define what it is you want. What is your vision? What is it that you are going for? Because that is what keeps you going in the right direction, going forward, not looking backwards, not getting stuck in what got you here to this point, but instead looking forward to, what do I need to do next to be one step closer to the vision that I hold, or that we hold as a group. And that's what I think it's a place that many of us as leaders in spiritual communities, we drop the ball. Yeah.
I think there's something going on, and you sort of reminded me in a comment earlier. I feel the same way at work. In the workplace, we've never asked anybody to go into their hearts and dig down to their deepest beliefs about themselves and others. We've never asked anybody to do this in the workplace. We're asking people to do something that has always been private and personal, right? When we ask them to go this deep. And I feel like it's the same thing in church communities, right? We're asking our communities to do something in community that they've never done before. Well, I don't know if I want to say never done before, but this sort of, we need to heal the lasting effects of racism, slavery, economic oppression, like all of the oppressive, history. We need to heal. We've never asked people to do that. And it makes a lot of sense to me. Well, first of all, it looks like we're failing, right? There's this huge pushback on DEI because it's hard to show the advances, and because we're talking a long game here. It's not going to come in the quarterly predictions that we're used to and that we want, right? This is a long game, and it's a deep, deep ask of people. And so I know in my work, I want to begin to acknowledge that more and just say out loud, we're asking you to do something different than you've ever done before. Are you willing? Are you courageous? Is it worth it to you?
Yeah, that word courageous. Yeah. Decades ago, I had a big focus on the 3 C's. I want to say they were, if I remember correctly, curiosity, courage, and commitment, and use them in a way to entice people. Like, first be curious about how you came to, believe what you believe in, the culture, how culture has grown you, but curious about how that's also true for other people. Courageous. If you have curiosity, then you also need to have courage to be willing to even explore that maybe your way is not the only way. And right, there are many different paths to get to some end result, and be, courageous to explore that, and then to try some new things. And then the third C was commitment, or demonstrate commitment to change, to grow. And I remember it wasn't just, I didn't want the third C to be change, because a lot of people hear change as I'm wrong, so I have to change. You're telling me to give up my way of being and my cultural and change to someone else's. And it's like, no, it's a commitment to navigate that together, right? And a commitment to continually explore, and that it's, like you said, it's the long game, not just what I'm doing right here this month. And maybe it's time. I have not thought about this. I'm in my mind, I'm seeing like my website from 30 years ago where the, front page was like the 3 keys to inclusion, or the 3 keys to whatever, or curiosity, courage, and commitment. And but in New Thought, which is one of the reasons I love doing this show on the New Thought Media Network. In New Thought, that's exactly what we teach people to do in their personal lives. So if any group of people is prepared to now apply this, have a clear vision, move toward it consistently, change your beliefs and the way you think about what's going on in your life, so that you can change your life, change your thinking, change your life. I don't understand why it's so hard for so many people, so many good spiritual people, to go like, wait a minute, all we're talking about doing is applying what I've been learning, however long I've been in New Thought, Science of Mind, or Unity, or Divine Science, or UFBL, or Independent, Agape, Hillside, etc., etc. However long I've been in New Thought, that's what I've been learning to do, and that's what I've been taught to practice. So it just amazes me that so many people don't see it's the exact same thing. Choose a direction, and then ask, what do I need to let go of? What do I need to release? And what do I need to learn, do, practice that moves me toward the new thought, the new vision?
So I'm going to speak as a white person here, and I'm going to just give you what I think is going on with a lot of other white people out there, because I've been doing this like deep introspective work and confronting my own bias and learning enough history to understand the historical context and continued proliferation of oppressive systems and structures across the board. It's been extremely painful. Even though, I'm not even racist, right? So I've never had any sort of racist thoughts. I've always been very loving. I knew and grew up with people of all different races, and so I got to kind of carry that learning that we really are all the same. I got to carry that forward. But in 10 years of doing this work, there are still really painful, really shameful, really difficult moments and conversations, not only just of what I find within myself and have to confront within my family and within the history of my people, but also in experiencing and hearing the pain of people who have who are recounting their experience of racism today in our spiritual communities, in the street, in the world, wherever. That is extremely painful. We, all of us, are pain avoiding, pleasure seeking animals. I have to always remind people, my clients all the time, that at our core, that's what we are. And so I've noticed that white people have an extremely thin learning zone. So, you've had the comfort zone where we all stay cozy and we don't learn much and we're not pushed to grow or change. And then we have that stretch zone. And after the stretch zone, we have a panic zone, right? Well, we're starting to go the other way. Well, I've noticed that white people's stretch zone around issues of racism is just really thin. So so thin. Like you can just barely see it. And so they go into panic. And then the panic makes them say, I don't want to do this work. And they don't have to. And that's where the privilege comes in. And so for me, it's not that mysterious. And it's not just white people that I'm actually talking about here, because I've also heard people of color and other marginalized groups say, I don't want to talk about this shit anymore. Can we get over it? I don't want to beat a dead horse. So nobody really wants to do this work because it's hard.
Well, yeah, there's I'm going to have to paraphrase it because I can't remember it exactly. But there's a quote that everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to do what it takes to get there. Right.
That's it. That's right. It. And when I say nobody wants to do this work, I am speaking to aspects of myself that do not want to do this work, but the prevailing passion and desire is for the change that we all want.
Yes. And that's why we have to keep the vision clearly in front of people over and over and over again.
What are we working towards? Yep.
Because otherwise, yeah, it is hard. And it is the emotional labor for, someone who is Black or brown, if the subject is race, or the emotional labor for someone who is transgender or gay or lesbian when the convert or bisexual or, whatever in the list we want to choose. If you're a part of the group that has experienced marginalization, it's hard replaying it over and over. And it is painful to see and hear people who are well-meaning say and do things that are just hurtful. And it's unintentional, but it doesn't hurt any less, right? It's difficult if someone is a senior citizen and they're experiencing ageism and being discounted and disregarded. That emotional labor, there's pain on all parts of the circle. So you're right. If we don't have a clear motivation for why, and then have some skills, some resources, some support, right? All of the other things that a lot of times people don't, or our churches don't build in all of that. It's like, well, we're talking about this and for the right reasons, and so it's just going to work. No, it doesn't just work. It's complex stuff.
Yeah, you're reminding me of something, like the idea that it's just going to work, right? I was even kind of overtaken by the delight of the fantasy when I first came to my church, because I saw this beautiful diverse crowd. I heard the principles. I said, well, you put this all together, we've got the paradise we've been looking for, right? Like, there it is. But that's not the case. And I've had a lot of conversations with people who just can't believe that others are experiencing racism within our walls. And so I say, fine, let's talk about what our brothers and sisters, our community is experiencing outside the walls, right? If we can't get aligned and accept what's happening within here, let's at least talk about what people are experiencing outside and what we can do to support them, right? So looking for the way into people's hearts to recognize that there is work to be done and that it's not automatic, because we all believe in and choose unity and oneness.
Yes, yes. So our time is winding down, but I do want to get in like a lesson learned from something that didn't work. And I don't know if you have one that comes to mind immediately. And one of the ones that comes to mind immediately for me is a situation we had in that I actually personally experienced. Sometimes I, share examples of what I've seen or what I've been called in to help with in other communities. But this is one I personally experienced where being in a part of a church that is very inclusive in many, many, many different ways, including around gender identity and sexual orientation. And so we had a congregant who was transitioning female to male and was relatively new in our community and was very new in our community, so wasn't well known. And as I met this person and engaged with them over probably about a 3 or 4 month period, I didn't know they were transitioning. I had no idea. It had never come up in conversation, and no one had said this is happening, and they had not said anything. And it's really funny when I think about this now, when people are so uncomfortable with pronoun usage. But it's funny to me because really we don't use pronouns when we're talking directly to someone. We use their name, right? Mm-hmm. So if I'm talking to you, I'm going to be saying, oh, Crystal, how did that go last week? Or, hey, Crystal, what's going on this week? Like, what are you really, engaged in, or what's on your calendar? But when you refer to that person is when you typically use a pronoun. So if someone says to me, do you know Crystal Fry? Is she here today? Or is Crystal Fry here at this event? And I look around and I'm like, oh yeah, she is the one over there, in the blue dress. That's really the most of the time that we're using pronouns, when we're referring to someone and they're not right in front of us. Mm-hmm. So this particular person came for prayer. And when we do spiritual mind treatment and science of mind, we don't say you. We use the person's name, or we use the pronoun, so that we're talking about them generically. And I prayed with this person, and there were a couple times where I said the person's name, and there were several times where I said she. I had no idea. No idea. So, long story short, it was a few weeks later when the individual had talked to the minister. Now, I was not the only practitioner that this had happened to, or that had done this, but I take personal responsibility for it, because when someone sits down in front of me for prayer, or calls me or emails me for prayer, if they come in front of me, I do ask them, and I don't know them, I'll ask them their name. But I had not been in the habit of asking them, what are your pronouns? And this person was really upset because the practitioners were using she, her, instead of they, them, or him and his. And I don't remember at that time what their pronouns that they had chosen at that point were, but it wasn't she, her. And it was a great learning opportunity because I already knew all of that. I just didn't, by my sight, recognize that this was happening. Now, fortunately, most of the time, someone who is transitioning actually will tell you, right? Or we have patterns where, as we introduce ourselves on the platform or in a meeting or in a class or on Zoom, and we list our pronouns. But this happened a few years ago, and it felt I was so sad. I wasn't as embarrassed as I was so sad that I had missed any cues that this person thought were obvious and that I had not thought to ask. So it was a failure, kind of a fail. It was something that a lesson learned from what was an uncomfortable and unfortunate experience that sometimes I still forget. But from that day on, if it's someone new and I'm going to do prayer with them, I generally will ask, like, what is your name and what are your pronouns? And some people look at me like I'm crazy. Like, what? What do you mean? But that's okay.
I think it's one of those things that's worth it, right? Like, I'll take that crazy look if one person feels safer in my presence, especially to receive prayer.
Yeah. And truly, it has been 3 or 4 times only in several years where someone has just said, thank you for asking, right? Thank you for asking. So that's one of the 5 or 6 OMG. That didn't work out the way I thought it was going to. For me, do you have one that comes to mind for you?
Well, I'm going to have to piggyback on that one because it turned out to be such a beautiful experience, but it was one of the most, in the moment, it was one of the most difficult, like shameful and embarrassing moments that I can remember. It was a Christmas Eve gathering, and there was a gift exchange. And first we had dinner, and this woman was sitting right beside me, and I liked her nail polish. Like, I remember thinking her outfit was cute. Like, I could tell that this was a lady. And when it turned around, we came around to gift time, and you could exchange the gifts. I forget the rules. It was very complicated. It was a communist gift exchange, but you could exchange the gifts. And I saw that somebody got an art kit, and I knew that she was an artist. And I said, he. I said, no, I said, give it to him. I wanted to rip my lips from my face. I knew what I had done. And I thought, in that moment, I felt such hatred for myself. And like, where deep down is it that like, I cannot acknowledge a lady when I see one? And so it was really traumatic for us both. She was very upset. She went away. I went away. And eventually, as the night went on, we came back and we got to talking, and we ended up having a very deep and profound discussion about these moments, about programming, about intentions. And we ended up the next day meeting up again on Christmas to go for a hike. And we became friends. And it was like, it went from the most painful, excruciating moment to one of the most lovely Christmas connections I've ever had. So one of my greatest mentors and spiritual mother, Deborah Jackson, taught me that conflict is a mode of expansion. And that is one of the greatest examples, because our perceptions and what we shared with each other and what we talked about, it was so expanded by the error, right? By the insult, that it generated something all new. And I think that that's the power that we're working with, and the hope that fuels my efforts.
Well, and that's why one of the things I say over and over to people, especially, one of the most asked questions or requests is, Tracy, just tell me exactly what to say or exactly what to do. And I'll do that, or I'll say that, because I don't want to make any mistakes, or I don't want to offend anyone. But that's not you don't want to offend anyone and you don't want to make mistakes. But the actual skill is the recovery, because the more people we interact with who are different from us in any way, the more likely it is that we're going to slip up, or we're going to act from our default, right? Your eyes see a person, your brain, it says that person is this gender, or that person is this age group, and that means X, Y, and Z, or that person is this race. And, right. So I'm going to make, and I think that's one of the reasons I also wanted to not end the show without, each of us giving an example, because the goal is not to be perfect every time. The goal is to be like, oh, all right, yep, that came out of my mouth. I feel really bad about it. And let me find this person and have a conversation. Let me apologize. Let me say, I actually know I screwed up here, and, and try and build a bridge. But if you're totally conflict avoidant, then you will not ever build the bridge. You won't grow from it. Then you'll be hesitant. You'll be in what you call the panic zone, right? And you'll never talk to anyone or say anything around someone again. And that's true whether it's race or sexual orientation or gender identity or age or religion. How many of us don't talk about our religion, our spiritual beliefs, if we're in company with folks who are from different spiritual groups, because we don't want to make a mistake, or we're not able to explain who we are well enough that we think we can have a conversation about it. So we just avoid it.
Right.
Avoiding is not a good, healthy strategy. So our time really is up now. So do you have one thing you really want people to take from this conversation before we close out?
I think it's for everybody to know that they can make a difference just by showing up, and that vulnerability and that willingness to mess up, that willingness to be seen as you are, is transformative and worth the effort.
Yes, yes. This is why Crystal Fry is my featured guest today. And as you can see on the screen, if you want to stay connected with Crystal, then just visit her website, crystalfry.com. Thanks, Crystal, for hanging out with me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Tracy. That's so good to be with you always, but to be bringing it out to our community is really fun. I appreciate the opportunity and the platform.
And everybody else, hang in there for just a couple more minutes as we thank our sponsors. If you are enjoying the programming on the New Thought Media Network, please consider giving a donation. And of course, I want you to come back and hang out with me next Tuesday and every Tuesday right here on the New Thought Media Network.
Thanks for watching The Inclusive Church with Tracy Brown. Join us again next week at 12 noon Mountain Time.
On behalf of everyone at New Thought Media Network, thank you for being a member of our virtual family. Your financial contributions help share the New Thought message with people from around the world. Please visit and contribute at www.ntmedia.org/donate. New Thought Media Network, come be you. And please like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, peace and blessings.